Welcome to the Texas High School Football Coaches Show on Lone Star Gridiron. I'm Chris Daly, and it's my belief that the men that make up the fraternity of Texas high school football coaches are much more than a bunch of thick-necked guys with whistles. They do so much more than teach technique and the X's and O's of football. They take young boys and change them into young men of character. They get kids to believe in themselves, to trust others, and to put others ahead of themselves. Texas high school football coaches are unique in how they impact the lives of these athletes as well as the generations those kids touch. In this show, I sit down with a different Texas high school football coach each time and learn about them. Not their record, not their on-field accomplishments, but who they are and what they believe and what it means to be part of the greatest sport in the greatest state. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Lone Star Gridiron Texas High School Football Coaches Show. I'm Chris Daly, and my guest this week is head coach Wayne Coleman from historic Jacksonville. That's right, home of the Tomato Bowl. And I have to tell you, if you have not been out there, you need to go check it out, especially now since they've recently been renovating it. I will introduce you to Coach Coleman right after this. Hey, I want to give a big thank you to this season's title sponsor, Mecca Sportswear, where they are all about celebrating achievement. They're honored that so many high schools, colleges, and universities have chosen Mecca's products to represent their institutions. Mecca supplies you with the very best in custom letter jackets, chenille letters, patches, blankets, banners, pins, certificates, and much more to motivate and celebrate achievement in athletics, academics, or the arts. They create high-quality custom awards that will fit your budget. To see why so many great schools around Texas choose Mecca Sportswear, call Sherry Armstrong or Billy Armstrong at 210-651-6592. Mecca Sportswear, the premier suppliers of letter jackets and awards for over 40 years.
Rocketman, the story of D.W. Rutledge and the Judson High School football dynasty, is a must-read. It provides complete coverage of every game coached by Rutledge, but more importantly, tells the stories of the impact he has had on the tens of thousands of students, parents, coaches, administrators, and fans. Dr. Charles Breithaupt and Chris Daly, both well-known in the Texas high school football community, joined forces to tell this much-needed and inspiring tale. Get your copy now at rocketmanbook.com.
All right, everybody, join me in welcoming Coach Wayne Coleman from Jacksonville to the show. Coach, how are things going?
It's going good, man. We're just got off season going. Kids are lifting hard. It's a great time of year, really, for coaches. I don't want to say you get to relax, but you really do. There's not a game every Friday. So you get to catch your breath, I guess, is a better way of saying it.
There you go. There you go. So as you know, this show's not about the team. It's about you. We're going to take a kind of a trip down amnesia lane and kind of figure it all out. I guess, talk about your first interaction or involvement with football itself.
Wow. I guess I was in first grade. I was one of those older kids in first grade. You know how the cutoff date is usually, in the fall or whatever. And so I had an early October birthday, and so I was one of the older first graders in our school.
Not like a 15-year-old first grader, right?
No. That's great. So anyway, the Little League program where I was growing up at St. Louis, you had to be, 7 years old or something by a certain date, and I barely got in. So my dad signed me up for Little League football, and I went over there and he dropped me off at the park with a bunch of second graders, and they took me and put me at safety. I remember because I didn't know anything about football. And when they told me I was going to be a safety, that made me feel really comfortable. I thought, that's got to be a safe position. So anyway, so in safety in Little League, that just means, you know what that means. That means way back there, away from the ball. Don't get in anybody's way. So the first year I did that, and then after that, it got better after that because, of course, the next year I was one of the older kids on the team. So, but anyway, I remember it clearly. I was terrified. The Little League park was just a couple blocks from my house, and the days would come where they'd say, "Okay, it's time for you to go to practice," and they'd be kicking me out the door, and I'd have to be hoofing it over there to practice. But it was a memorable time. I still have lifelong friends. My coaches from those early teams, my very first football teams, are still lifelong friends of our entire family.
Mm-hmm. Sweet. So, and when did you figure out, hey, I might want to be a coach for a living?
I went to I went to college in '86, and that was just about the time when computers were really starting to get big. I mean, you didn't have one in your house, but they were starting to put computer labs in the schools and stuff. And so when I went to college, I thought, man, I'm going to get rich learning how to work on computers. I'm going to become some program writer or something. And I went to college. I played football. I was playing quarterback at Missouri Western, and I wasn't very good. And I went to my first computer class, and the instructor was from the Middle East, and I couldn't understand a word he said. And I just sat there for a little while, a few weeks, and I was like, this isn't going to work because I'm totally lost here. Mm-hmm. And so I got out of the computer class, and it was kind of like, after that first year, I was like, what am I going to do? I want to do something easy. And I remember in high school, English always came easy to me. I was writing research papers in high school. It was very easy for me. I loved literature. So I thought, well, I'll be a sports writer is what I thought. Mm-hmm. Well, about that time, I got injured playing football, and my playing career was coming to an end early in my sophomore year, and the coach didn't want me to quit. He said, "Why don't you come out and just be a student assistant for us?" And at the Division II level, man, you're always trying to scrounge up extra help. And, you're looking for coaches anywhere you can find them. So anyway, I ended up coaching quarterbacks the next that year. For 3 years, I coached the quarterback position as a student assistant, and that was kind of my awakening of, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not a sports writer. Maybe I'm a coach and an English teacher. Maybe that's what I am. Because up in Missouri, it's not like Texas. And up there, it's like you're a teacher, and we'll let you coach football. It's not you're a football coach, and what can you teach? It's the other way up there. So anyway, it was kind of one of those deals where my injury kind of coincided about the time I was looking for a new major anyway, and the coach that actually asked me to be the student assistant there, he ended up my senior year as I'm about to graduate taking a job at Southern Arkansas University and asked me to come be a GA for him. Mm-hmm. So that took up the next 2 years of my life, and that kind of put me on the track going into coaching.
Nice. So when you initially are looking for something easy to do, you didn't realize what a hard job you were falling into.
Well, no, I didn't know. I was like, okay, if I'm going to coach and I'm going to teach, I want to teach something easy. So I was like, I don't want a hard gig here. I was like, well, English is easy for me. I can write research papers all day, and I love reading, and so I thought that's the way to go, because when I was in high school, I was in the advanced English classes and stuff, getting college credit and stuff, and I thought, man, this is nothing. Maybe I had great teachers. I think that's probably what it was. And so it was kind of one of those deals of, I don't want to work too hard here because I'm not going to get rich, so maybe I'll just do English. Right. Yeah.
Nice. So, all right, so we have you as a GA.
If you could give us stop-by-stop every position you've held up to today.
Oh, wow. So I'm a GA at Southern Arkansas University in this little bitty pine tree town in Southern Arkansas in Magnolia. And I get in there, and I had been, like I said, the quarterback student coach at Missouri Western. And so they're going to keep me on the offensive side of the ball. And I become the receiver coach. So SAU is another Division II school where the GAs actually have their own positions to coach. So I remember coach that first year at wide receivers. The next year, late in the summer, our linebacker coach left. Our full-time linebacker coach left, and so they needed me to go over and coach linebackers. So I literally coached an All-American at slot receiver my first year, and then moved over and coached an All-American linebacker my second year. So I didn't really have to be a very good coach. It was crazy. But anyway, both those kids ended up playing in the CFL coming out of Division II football. So then my wife gets pregnant in the second year, and we're sitting there, and she's, 4 or 5, I guess 3 months pregnant, I guess. Mm-hmm. And it's coming up on Christmas, and I have finished all my credits. I've been there a year and a half. I've got all my master's work done, and it's kind of like, ooh, she's pregnant. I don't have any more classes to take. What are we going to do here? So go to the placement office, Marshall High School in East Texas. The Marshall Mavericks are looking for an English teacher at Christmas break because they had a teacher had retired at Christmas. And so drive down there, meet Patsy Smith, the superintendent. She takes me down to Dennis Parker's office and says, Dennis, I got a new coach for you. And he said, I don't have any openings. She said, I know you don't. I'm letting you add a position. She said, I have to have an English teacher next week. He has to have a job. His wife's pregnant, and you get to add a coach. So that's how I got to join the Marshall Mavericks. So anyway, it sounded great right at the time. I mean, coming to Texas and seeing the amazing facilities that they had in Marshall in 1988, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. So I get there, start work, and I go down to the field house, and Dennis was like, hey, you're the 7th grade coach. So I go over and I coach middle school football for a couple of years. Then my third year, they moved me up to the high school to coach the freshman team. Oh, by the way, my very first high school football game I ever went to in Texas, I just gotten to Marshall. We were in our first year. The very first game I went to is the Marshall Mavericks against Odessa Permian, the year that they wrote Friday Night Lights. And it's Odessa's first game trip to East Texas. They come in. We've got 10,000 people there. We've got these Russian scientists that were up in Karnak doing disarmament and some arms race crap that, none of us knew about. But it was amazing. The very first high school football game in Texas I ever saw was 10,000 people, 5,000 dressed in red and 5,000 dressed in black. And it was the Mavericks against Odessa Permian. And I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I thought, this is crazy. So anyway, 3 years at Marshall. Dennis leaves after the state championship game against Judson. He goes to North Texas State, gets the head job there. Half of us leave the Marshall staff and come to Jacksonville. I come as the offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. I'm here in Jacksonville through 91 through 97. It's when the McCowan brothers started coming through here and playing quarterback for us. I leave in July of 97 to get my first head coaching job in Beeville, Texas, A.C. Jones High School in Beeville. Yeah. And so I was there for 5 years, had a couple good playoff runs, had a couple decent runs of athletes, a couple of really good athletes came through and went to TCU, played for them there. Left Beeville Jones, and 2001, went to Fort Worth Brewer up at White Settlement. Mm-hmm. Stayed 4 years there as a head coach, but finished my 9th year of head coaching, and things weren't looking too good at Brewer. We'd had one playoff team, had broken a long playoff drought. We really were Brewers in that zone of they're between Fort Worth and Aledo. So if you're going to move and leave Fort Worth and buy a new house, are you going to stop in White Settlement, or are you going to go ahead and go to Aledo? So we were kind of getting skipped over and losing some athletes. I had a friend that was just getting the superintendent's job at Trinity, Texas, down by Huntsville. So I left Brewer, went to work for him, stayed there 1 year, and my friend at Gilmer, Jeff Traylor, called and was complaining about needing some help on his staff with some things that weren't going too good or whatever, and I was complaining about my job, and we were sitting there complaining to each other, and I said, how much would you pay a guy to come do that job? And when he told me, I said, I'm going to be up there tomorrow to come visit. So anyway, I left Trinity. That was my 10th year as a head coach. Went to Gilmer thinking, I'll stay there a year or two and then get back in it. I got up there, fell in love with it. We won a lot of games there, stayed there, 2007 to 2014. Mm-hmm. And during all this time after I had left Jacksonville the first time, the Jacksonville job had come open, 3 or 4 times. And every time it came open, I thought, I should apply for that. Maybe I want to go back to Jacksonville, but I never did. The timing was always wrong. It was always like I had just gotten to another job, and then it would come open. And so I never did. So anyway, after we won the state championship in Gilmer in 2014, the Jacksonville job came open again, and it just felt right. You get to a stage in your career like, okay, am I ever going to do the head coaching thing again? If I am, is there a better time right after state championship, or is there a better place, someplace where you already know the people? Is there really ever going to be a better opportunity? And it just seemed like the perfect fit to come back to Jacksonville. So here we are 4 years later, and love being an Indian.
Nice. You were involved in some pretty good programs at some key, I guess, points in their history. So, you got to feel fortunate to be around at those times.
It's, I tell some coaches, I tell my coaches all the time that you have to be so lucky so many times just to end up in the right place at the right time. Because when I went into Marshall, they had started getting better, but my first year at Marshall, I just waltzed in, and I'm just a junior high coach, but it's the first year that we won the district and broke the streak and beat Longview, and my first year there, we beat Permian. We get beat in the quarterfinals by the infamous Dallas Carter team that had all the ineligible players and ended up later forfeiting. So that was an amazing just to be a part of that part of history. And then, of course, a couple years later, we won state there. But, I just luckily just flopped into that. And the thing about that kind of stuff is when you land in a system like that, you learn how to do things the right way, how a system's supposed to be run. And then as you start to move around the state, you'll see things in other schools or whatever, and you can identify, for instance, when I went to Beeville after Jacksonville, my daughter was taking dance classes in Victoria, so I take her over there one day, and I swing, drop her off at dance class. I run over to Victoria High School, and Mark Reeves is over there, and he's running his off-season program. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, hey, you're doing mat drills just like we did them in Marshall. Yeah. And he said, yeah. He said, we got all this from Marshall. Leonard McAngus was with those guys over, somewhere. Oh, Leonard McAngus had been at Marshall with Dennis before I had ever gotten there. And Dennis had been with D.W. Rutledge at Converse Judson. Yep. And so, we're tracing it all back. And it's like as you go around the state, you're like, hey, you're doing command weights just like we did in 1988 at Marshall, in the same way we do it in Gilmer, in the same way we do it in Jacksonville, in the same way they do it at Victoria, in the same way they do it at Converse Judson, in the same way they do it, you know what I'm saying? So it's all connected. And so, you got to be lucky to land in the system. And what's scary is it's unfortunate for the guys that don't end up in that system, and not because they're not good coaches or anything else, but they may have graduated college and taken the best job they could find at the time and ended up in a program or in a town that doesn't care that much about athletics. And so you don't ever get to see how it's done the right way until you're, watching some movie about Friday Night Lights or something and realize it really is important. And then the Jacksonville run with all the McCallans coming through was crazy. And you remember the bonfire game at Texas A&M when the bonfire collapsed, and a lot of people don't remember this, but the people in Jacksonville do. Randy McCallum was the quarterback that year, and he threw the game-winning touchdown pass in the corner of the end zone to upset Texas. And so there's so much stuff that if you look back on it, you're like, wow, I know that guy, or wow, I know that program, or wow, I know why that's done that way. And you sometimes, when you're in the middle of it, you take all that for granted, I guess, until you're talking to somebody like this situation here, and you start to reflect on it.
Yeah, definitely. You talked about connections. One thing I've learned time and again is that nobody gets anywhere with any kind of success by themselves. So if you could, point out some of the coaches that played a role in your career and maybe some things you picked up from them.
Yeah. I had to go to a funeral back in a couple months ago. Actually, it was one of my Little League, that first Little League coach, his wife had passed away, so we had driven all the way up to St. Louis for the funeral. And while I was up there, I saw some of my old teammates, high school teammates, and they asked if I ever saw Coach Fuhop anymore, who was my high school coach, and said no. And I got to thinking about that, and been trying to get in touch with him. And his wife, Coach Fuhop's wife, was my middle school math teacher. And you know how middle school boys are. They're always trying to be the class clown or whatever. And that's, I wanted to be popular, and that's kind of stuff I was doing, and just being a class clown. And she would go home and tell her husband, that Wayne was acting a fool in class and stuff. And so he would, the next day he'd talk to me about it and stuff. And looking back on it, I think I think that's where I, as far as making my first coach connection, somebody that I really looked up to. My high school coach was somebody that, he had this pretty wife. It seemed like he had the perfect life, looking back on it. And we had a great relationship. And so that's one connection. That's probably one of my earliest connections. Going to work for Dennis Parker at Marshall was a real eye-opener on just how to run a program. And I know Dennis didn't think all of that stuff on his own, and I know we coaches steal stuff from each other all the time, ideas, and whether it's plays or practice organization or whatever. But Dennis was so organized and did such a great job with our off-season program that he had a tremendous influence on just thinking about how to run a program, what we learned from him, and we brought that to Jacksonville, because about 5 or 6 of us left that staff and came to Jacksonville after that state championship, and put all of that into place here. And then those guys, a bunch of those guys left Jacksonville and went to Gilmer. And that same program has won a lot of games up in Gilmer. So Dennis has had a big influence on my life and a bunch of other guys' lives. One of the guys on that staff, Matt Turner, is just one of the best people I've ever known. He's the head coach at Gilmer right now, and just incredible Christian man, great father, great role model. So there's been, and Matt and I coached middle school together at Marshall, and then moved up to the high school after a couple of years. But and then we came together to Jacksonville, and it's just been, you don't realize, we have these coaching clinics this time of year, and you go back to them, like there was 400 guys over at the Longview Clinic last week, and there'll be 1,000 guys at the Lone Star Clinic here in a couple of weeks, and you go to those things and you see those guys and that you worked with 10 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever, and it's the only time you get to catch up with them. And coaches are kind of a rare deal of, I don't know how to say this, it's like we don't hang out with other people that aren't coaches. I don't know. That's kind of weird. I don't know. I don't have any friends that aren't coaches. So maybe that's sad. I don't know. Maybe that's what that is.
I'm just thinking, gosh, I'm not going to become your friend.
Yeah. But, I can't tell you the last time I was at somebody's house at a barbecue that wasn't a coach, or somebody that was at my house eating barbecue. It just doesn't happen. We don't go out to eat with other people. It's just kind of a weird deal. But just looking back on that, and it's great because I've got friends all over the state. If I want to hit the road and go somewhere, and if I break down, I bet you if I sat there long enough on the side of the road and thought, now who lives around here, I could probably think of one of the guys I coach with. So that is the neat part about it. We make some moves, but we do have friends all over the state. So that has been a blessing for us.
Nice, definitely. One of the things I love, obviously you can tell from this show, is talking about history of Texas high school football. Jacksonville is steeped in history, and of course I'm thinking of the Tomato Bowl. Gosh, if you could explain that to some people.
Yeah, it's weird. So I'm in Marshall, Texas, which is probably 70 miles from Jacksonville, maybe. And so when I'm in Marshall and Dennis has gone to North Texas and I'm teaching summer school classes to make some extra money, and Danny Long comes and knocks on my door and says, "Hey, man, I got the head job at Jacksonville. You want to go with me?" I'm like, "Where's Jacksonville?" They're both in East Texas. But, I had come from Missouri to Arkansas to Marshall, and so I had barely stuck my toe across the state line, really. And he's like, "Jacksonville, down by Tyler?" And I'm like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And so I'm having to look Jacksonville up on the map. So then the first time I come here and I see this old rock stadium, and I'm like, what in the world is this? Now, I'm coming from Marshall, which at the time their facilities were really new. Yeah. And so I come and see this old rock stadium, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is kind of cool. But then you go in the dressing room, and it's like the original dressing room. And, it's old and smelly. And there's something about, that first Friday night in the Tomato Bowl, the people come in and just fill it up. And you're like, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe all these people are in here just to watch us go 2-8. And but they didn't know we were going to go 2-8, I guess. Right. But the pride, and I like the perfect Texas high school one-horse town. It's just, this is it. It's like when you go into the Tomato Bowl, it's just an amazing setting. There's no parking. There's not a parking lot. You have to. There's like Main Street that goes downtown and kind of runs parallel to the railroad tracks, and then everybody just has to find some place to park on the street somewhere. And so by the time you park on a few streets around the Tomato Bowl, you've run out of parking, and some of these people are having to walk a mile to get into the stadium. And it's just an electric atmosphere. And we didn't get to play in it this year. We played 10 road games because it's being renovated.
Oh, yeah.
And we were, on the verge. At some point, a stadium just gets too old to be safe anymore or whatever. And we kind of got to that point where the Tomato Bowl had to get some renovations. But the neat thing is they preserved the rock wall while they went in and fixed everything else on the inside.
Nice. I love it. If you could, let's talk about the job of coaching itself. There's the wins and losses, there's the X's and O's, and then there's the intangibles, the things that you can't quantify with a number. Talk about what's important as a head coach.
Yeah. It has changed so much. It's changed so much. From when I got my first head job in '97, I went to Beeville, and Beeville's kind of, a Coastal Bend area school, and probably our ethnic makeup was probably, 50% Hispanic and 40% Anglo and 10% African American. And but in a town like that with that ethnic makeup, we still had, we had a very high rate of two-parent homes. Mm-hmm. And here I am, however long later, 20 years later, and it seems like that has been, it's way down. I don't know. It seems like I'm in Jacksonville, and it feels like we're at about maybe 35% two-parent homes.
Wow.
And that has become a real challenge as coaches, because we see all these boys that don't have dads at home.
Yeah.
And you don't ever want a kid to feel like you're trying to be his dad, but you feel obligated to try to help these kids, become successful in life. And you talk to them all the time about being a good decision maker and, knowing right from wrong. And it's become a real challenge of getting these kids to where you want them to go, but they don't want to go there. If you were their dad, you'd be doing the same thing. You'd be trying to guide them in this direction of, you're going to go to college, or you're going to go to vocational school. You're going to get a degree, or you're going to get certified, to do something and be productive out there in society. And as coaches, that's what we're trying to do. But it's almost the battle that you're fighting is the outside forces that are saying, no, you don't want to do that. And I'm talking about the stuff. And I'm talking about outside forces. And I'm talking about people on the streets.
Right.
The distractions, the people that want to get them to take shortcuts, drop out of school, go get a job, or go sell drugs, or whatever all those distractions are out there that you're trying to save these kids from. And those become the wins that mean a heck of a lot more whenever I see Emilio, that we got set up at A&M Commerce a couple years ago, my inside linebacker that was just an average high school linebacker, but now he's a student assistant at A&M Commerce. And then the A&M Commerce coach just got the SFA job, and he's asked Emilio to go with him. Now I'm like high-fiving myself saying, hey, yeah, we got one right there, for Emilio. And those are the wins. I coach in East Texas. Occasionally I'm going to have a Division I athlete every year or two, and we got athletes in East Texas. But how many times am I going to get a kid out of here that, like Emilio, that's going to end up going and, coaching college football or, whatever it is that we're going to get him to do. So those are the battles and the wins that we're fighting for all the time. And I've got kids, we probably, in the last 2 or 3 years have probably signed a dozen kids either to JUCO ball or, Division II ball, or we had one go to TCU this year. So we have those kids, but even more important are the kids that aren't the ones getting the offers and scholarships. It's those kids that okay, if this kid doesn't have football after high school, what is he going to do?
Right.
Can we get him into tech school over in Marshall? Can we get him, into welding school up in Tulsa? Where can we get this kid? And those become the battles that you're just like, yeah, nobody's ever going to see that score on that. Nobody's going to know your one-loss record. But those are the ones, man, you're just like, as a coaching staff, you just get excited when you hear about those kids. And, it's, I got a kid, I guess I probably shouldn't say his name, okay? So there's a kid that lives on the wrong side of town that I've picked up for the last 2 years. He's a senior now. And he's in trouble all the time, his freshman, sophomore year, his junior year, really. And I pick him up every morning, wrong side of town. But to his coaches, he was always yes or no, sir, yes or no, sir. And he is he's going to graduate now. He made it through his senior year without being in any trouble at all. And of course, I talked to all my seniors after the season about what can I help you do, what do you want to do, blah, blah. Anyway, he's going to go to truck driving school. And to a lot of people, that's like, yeah, well, that's not a big deal, right? Trust me, to some people, to see a kid that in 9th grade, no one would have bet a nickel on him graduating. 10th grade, 11th grade, and now here we are in his senior year. And on our football team, all he ever got to do this year on our varsity football team was run down on kickoff. Never got to play on offense, never got to play on defense. We let him run down on kickoff. And but you know what? In May, he's going to walk across that stage, and it's going to be the biggest win that I had this year. And he's going to go to truck driving school, and I'm going to be fired up for him. So it's just that's the kind of stuff that just most people don't they don't know about that stuff. But that's the real good stuff. He wanted to play more. He wanted to get out there and play receiver. He's disappointed that I didn't let him play more. But we have a relationship that he understands why, and he understands that some people are gifted athletically, and some people are gifted academically, and some people are just gifted with a great work ethic. And he's learned he didn't have any of that. He had none of those things. But he has developed a work ethic over the last 3 years of show up every day. I'm going to pick you up. We're going to get there on time. We're going to do our work, and we're going to graduate. And then what are we going to do? And then for the last year, and what are we going to do? Finally, he decided he wants to be a truck driver like his grandpa, and so that's what we're going to do. So he's got a plan now. So that's good. All is good.
Amen. Amen. That is what it's all about. That's what coaching's about. That's what the show's about, is to help people understand what really matters when it comes to high school football coaching.
Yeah, hey, we all love winning. We all love winning state championships and all that stuff. It's great. It is. It's the best thing ever. I love it. But at the end of the year, only one team wins it all, right? Everybody else doesn't. So you better be. Hopefully, we're all out there trying to win those battles, and those are the ones. We tell coaches all the time. Anybody can coach the good kid, the kid that's got the straight A student. I don't pay you to coach the straight A student. I pay you to coach this kid that doesn't have a dad at home. I pay you to coach this kid that hates school, that will quit if we don't keep working with him. I pay you to coach those guys. Don't come to me and say I can't coach this kid. What do you mean? That's the one I'm paying you to coach.
Coach Wayne Coleman, man, I can't thank you enough. This has been a great interview, and I just love the fact that you took some time out of your day to share with us.
Hey, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate what you're doing, what your mission is, and I'm just glad that I got to be a part of it.
Rocketman, the story of D.W. Rutledge and the Judson High School football dynasty, is a must-read. It provides complete coverage of every game coached by Rutledge, but more importantly, tells the stories of the impact he has had on the tens of thousands of students, parents, coaches, administrators, and fans. Dr. Charles Breithaupt and Chris Daly, both well known in the Texas high school football community, joined forces to tell this much-needed and inspiring tale. Get your copy now at rocketmanbook.com.
This show is brought to you by the book, All I Need to Know I Learned from My Texas High School Football Coach, a handbook of wisdom for parents, young people, and yes, even coaches. Head over to www.learnedfromcoach.com and order your copy to support sharing the stories of these great coaches and leaders. That's learnedfromcoach.com.
Once again, I want to thank Coach Wayne Coleman for the interview. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and ask you to please support these sponsors, because without them, we wouldn't be able to bring you the Lone Star Gridiron Texas High School Football Coaches Show. Until next time, we'll see you at the game.